In today's video, we're exploring the possibility of the Chicago Blackhawks going down a major sell-off and possibly moving several players before the NHL trade deadline. We're also taking a look at the possibility of the Dallas Stars trading a goaltender. We also have news from the NHL Waiver Wire and some injury updates as well. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have several NHL news and rumor items to discuss today. First up, a couple quick items here from the NHL Waiver Wire. First up on the Waiver Wire today, we have the Arizona Coyotes defenseman Kyle Capobianco. Of course, he is a player that might draw interest from other NHL teams. He does have a decent amount of NHL experience here as of right now, so we'll see what happens with him. He can be assigned to the minors if he clears waivers at this time tomorrow afternoon. Now, of course, we also have another player here on waivers today, and that's Marian Studnick from the New Jersey Devils. He's only appeared in 5 games so far, but the forward is yet to put up any points, and at this point, they want to assign him to their American Hockey League affiliate, so we'll find out at 3 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow afternoon if either player has been claimed or if they can be assigned or demoted to their American Hockey League affiliate. Now, we also have some updates on some injuries. Of course, we had discussed previously that the Maple Leafs have run into more injuries with goaltender Peter Mrazek. The Leafs have updated information here on the injury status. They placed him on injury reserve, retroactive, back to earlier this month, and he's going to be out for about 4 weeks. So he's going to miss almost another month of action. That's certainly not what the Leafs had hoped for when they brought him in to work with Jack Campbell. Campbell's been really good so far, but I'm sure they would probably rather have Campbell play a slightly lighter workload here and save some energy for the the tail end of the season and the playoffs. Mrazek's a good goalie, but like Campbell, they both have had their issues in the past with injuries. So, as I mentioned before, that was certainly my concern with their new tandem. Very capable goalies, but health is certainly a concern. Campbell has been pretty good as of late, thankfully, but if he were to get hurt, that would create quite a predicament here for the Maple Leafs. So we'll have to see where things go on that front. We also got word today that defenseman Luke Schen's going to be out for a few weeks for the Vancouver Canucks. So that's certainly not good for them. Of course, the Vancouver Canucks are certainly a team that's been having a bit of an up and down season here so far, so the injury bug's not going to help matters there. We also got word today that the Senators are calling up defenseman Erik Branstrom. Now, Branstrom's a player we've mentioned and talked about in the NHL trade rumor mill. Of course, he's one of the top pieces that came over in the Mark Stone trade from the Vegas Golden Knights, a former first-round selection of theirs. Branstrom's been with the club now for a few years, but has really failed to take and keep a full-time spot on the NHL roster. He's had stretches where he's played, 15, 20 games or so, but it seems to be, over time falling out of favor with head coach DJ Smith. And at this point, they haven't had a great start. Slightly better than last year, but not by much. I think everybody's expectations for this team has been a little bit higher given the progress that we saw at the end of last season and some of the, the fact that all these young players, even though they're young, they're another year older. Many of them gain a lot of valuable experience, but that blue line's been an absolute mess. So hopefully Branstrom gets a chance to play over some veteran guys like Holden and Del Zotto, even Josh Brown. It's the same thing last year. They played the vets way too much. Once they let the kids take over and stabilize into some long-term roles, things stabilized and got much better, but it was too little too late, and they had put up too many losses early in the year to make up the lost ground to get into the playoffs. So clearly this team and this management and coaching staff have not learned from their mistakes, and hopefully Branstrom gets more of a fair shake moving forward here, because at this point, I don't think he can be much worse than what we've seen with some of those other veterans playing ahead of him. Now, as I mentioned, we have a little bit of trade rumor talk to look at here today. One piece of information is on the Dallas Stars. It comes from Matthew DeFranks, writer for the Stars, talking about the fact that Ben Bishop is now technically eligible to come off long-term injury reserve. However, at this point, the Dallas Stars really can't do that due to their salary cap, lack of availability, we should say. So they obviously have Hudobin and Holtby right now, who's been playing the bulk of this season so far, and it wouldn't be a shocking move if one of those two goaltenders are traded. I think the main reason Holtby was brought in was mainly for insurance purposes, and is, so far that's proven to be valuable. But they also have Jake Ottinger in the American Hockey League, who really in my opinion, should be at the NHL level. But of course, he's waivers exempt still, so he's able to go down there and play a big role for their AHL affiliate team and let the veteran guys hold down the fort at the NHL. But between Bishop and Ottinger, wouldn't be shocking if one or both these goalies is moved at some point. But personally, I'm not sure which one's more likely. They're both in different stages of their career, but ultimately they both have short-term deals, and it wouldn't be a surprise at all if one of these guys are moved for help in other areas. There's a number of teams out there looking for goaltending help, and these guys might be attractive for one of these other teams. So I don't expect a huge return, and at this point, it's hard to say what the Dallas Stars do in this case. I mean, normally you wouldn't trade a goalie if you're in the mix hoping to make a playoffs, but at the same time, like I said, they have Bishop who could come off long-term injury reserve, and they have Ottinger as well. So they have a plethora of guys here, and there's only so much playing time to go around. Now, I also want to take a look at an Athletic article for Scott Powers examining the Chicago Blackhawks. Of course, we've seen a terrible start off the ice and on the ice this season. Of course, we have the whole Kyle Beach investigation plaguing this team, really, having a major impact on the team's past. Obviously, kind of leaving a stain on those Stanley Cup championships. We've seen several members of that organization leave, including guys that are no longer with the Hawks, but working in other NHL roles like Joel Quenneville, Stan Bowman's out, etc. And now it's time to move on. They just fired head coach Jeremy Colleton, of course, who was hired by Bowman and seemed to be a guy that Bowman really supported. So I don't think he would have been let go had Bowman still been with the organization here. But ultimately, this article really goes on to say that the next few games of the season, by the time they get to that 15 to 20 game mark, should kind of indicate whether or not they go in one or two directions. Do they look to make maybe just one or two moves to try to make things a little bit better and see if they can salvage the season, try to see if they can compete for playoffs? Or at that point, do they just kind of say, you know what, it's not happening, this team is just not good enough, and kind of go more into sell-off / tank mode? They have a lot of players that would probably be reasonably attractive to other teams that have shorter term contracts remaining. They have some veteran guys that could draw attention as well. The article even goes on to ponder and talk about the fact that it's something that they should even exploring is moving Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews. They only have one more year left on their contracts. The only problem with those two guys is they have control over their destinations. They have the trade protection, so the Blackhawks just can't move them. And obviously with their cap hits, it would not be easy to do, but where they only have one more year left, if the Hawks were to be able to retain a little bit of salary, that would open up the door to a lot of NHL teams being able to accommodate those contracts on their books. So it's not completely unrealistic here. I think Patrick Kane still has a lot to offer myself. He's still one of the league's top playmaking wingers. I think he would have a ton of interest myself. I'm not sure about Jonathan Toews. I think there'd be a fair bit. I mean, the guy has quite a resume, including 3 Stanley Cups and multiple conversations of the Selke Trophy. So, he's certainly a strong player. Now, of course, I do think these players also have suffered a little bit with their off-ice reputation and image, given their initial comments on the Kyle Beach situation. I know they've since both made additional comments trying to clarify things and kind of, make things look a little bit better and actually support the player and Beach a little more, which is nice to see. But at the same time, once you've made public comments, it's hard to go back on them completely. But, as much as, like I said, those two guys have a lot of control, the article examines, and I do agree with the fact that it's something they need to really consider. It only really outlines a couple of players that they're going to really try to build around moving forward, and that's youngsters like Alex DeBrincat, for example, is obviously a top young winger who can score tons of goals. You have Kirby Dach, their top future number 1 center iceman. And of course, Seth Jones, who they just inked to a long-term deal, has to be part of the solution as well. I mean, I know he had a rough start to his season defensively, but he has been contributing on the offensive side of the puck. And I think fair to say that he settled in and it's certainly, been better than he was at the first part of the year. I still think there's room for him to continue to get better, to get back to his old self. But at the same time, at least it's better than what we saw in the first few games where a lot of us were holding our breath saying that contract extension hasn't even kicked in yet and he looks terrible. But at least, it's a little bit better on that front. But otherwise, it's free game, including Marc-Andre Fleury, who's bound to draw some interest. Even goalie Kevin Lankinen's mentioned as a potential trade piece as well. But I think Fleury would obviously draw the much bigger interest from around the NHL. That's no surprise there at all. It also goes on to talk about even a young forward like Dominic Kubalik. I mean, Kubalik is not far removed from being a 30-goal scorer in this league. He's making an affordable contract under $4 million. I think he would draw a fair bit of interest. That's fair to say. They also reference defenseman Calvin DeHaan. Of course, he might get some interest, but DeHaan is often injured, and that's been the story of his career. He's had so many knee injuries. I don't see him having too much longer left in the tank here, given all the battle wounds he's suffered over the years. A guy like Ryan Carpenter could certainly draw interest as a nice depth player as well. So really, that's a lot of players that could draw a lot of interest and bring a lot of returns back to really make sure that they can move forward. Now, of course, in the Seth Jones trade, they did give up their first-round pick, but there is lottery protection in that. So if they get a super high pick and they can pick like in the first couple spots, they get to keep that pick and defer giving that pick to Columbus till next year. So ultimately, that's part of the reason why they kind of have to decide what to do here and do it early, because if they're going to tank, they need to make sure they do it right and get a high pick so that they can keep it. If they pick just below the protected part, they end up picking like 4 or 5, and they have to give that up. That's really going to hurt taking this team forward in the rebuild, which will obviously, Columbus will sit back and gladly accept that. I have no doubt about it. This is a deep draft coming up. And they would gladly accept that selection. But at the same time, the Hawks, I think, can't afford to lose that. So it would not be surprising at all to see them sell off as many assets as they can and go into tank mode here. So I think we're going to see some veteran guys get on the move. I mean, Kubalik's a real interesting one. He's a guy that many teams probably wouldn't have expected to be available on the market. Fleury's probably not a goalie you expect it to be available later in the season, and some of their stats right now might seem not very good and attractive, but these guys have talent, they have pedigree, and you know that a lot of this is really team-related more so than it is individually, and that teams will still show and express interest. Now, will we see something huge like a Kane or Toews trade? I wouldn't really bank on it. I think it's something the Chicago Blackhawks, as an organization, certainly need to explore and consider. It's more likely to happen in the offseason with 1 year left on their contract than it would be between now and the NHL trade deadline. But if it's not now, before the end of those contracts, they really should see what they can do to get some return, let them finish out their last year of their contracts and results, and move on as an organization. Given everything the team has gone through off the ice as well, and now that this whole basically their 3-cup dynasty kind of has a big stain on it, it might not be terrible as well just to kind of get a fresh start with a fresh group and start working towards the next dynasty they can hopefully build down the road. But let me know what your thoughts are. Will the Hawks go into that kind of mode where they're basically tanking and selling off assets? And if so, which players do you think will get the biggest return and most interest from the other NHL clubs? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.